Good morning, everybody. I'm Adam Crawford. I was until earlier this year the director of the N8 Policing Research Partnership, and I'm delighted to welcome everybody to today's conference, first day of a two-day conference. This is all a little bit of a novelty for us. We initially planned this conference to take place in June of this year. In person. So here we go. There's bound to be some technical issues as we go along. As I say, I'm Adam Crawford from the University of Leeds. I have been the principal investigator on the Catalyst grant, which is informed today's conference. So my role today is... Hang on. I'm having difficulty with... there we go. So my role today, therefore, is as follows. First of all, to introduce the conference aims, to say something about the structure and program across the 2 days. I've got a few administrative or housekeeping matters to attend to, and then briefly to introduce the N8 Policing Research Partnership and the Catalyst grant, which informed it. And then I will introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Mike Cunningham. With regard to the conference aims, the conference provides the end of a 5-year Catalyst grant, which began in May 2015. So one of the aims of the conference across today and tomorrow is to showcase the work of the N8 Policing Research Partnership and brings together the breadth of activity supported and initiated by the conference. And therefore, I'd like to start off by thanking the Higher Education Funding Council for England, which then became the Office for Students, which took over management of the Catalyst grant in 2018. And in particular to Matt Jennings, who's been our contract manager throughout that period, allowing us to extend the end of the year given COVID-19 pandemic. As I said, the conference was due to take place earlier in the year, but we've been able to extend the grant until the end of this year. As I said, we originally planned for the conference to take place face-to-face in Leeds in June 2020. We've largely stuck with the same framing of the conference, but moved it online with the facilitation and assistance of Overlap Associates, who will be facilitating the conference today and tomorrow. We very deliberately have capped the attendance at 200 to enable small group discussions and small group workshops, and to enable engagement from our audience, delegates. And what that does mean is that those small group workshops will be limited in size and a number. But it did mean actually that a large number of people have been unable to. We have capped the number. One of the benefits, I suppose, of moving it online has been the fact that people have been able to access this conference that otherwise might not have been able to have travelled to Leeds. With regard to the structure of the programme, we have a very busy programme across 2 days. And by and large, the 2 days fall into 2 separate sets of aims. Day 1 is really a retrospective review of the lessons from the N8 Policing Research Partnership and other developments, both the College of Policing and other police academic partnerships across the UK. And I think an analogy which we're likely to hear reference to on a number of occasions across the 2 days is one of a journey. And in the first day, we're going to reflect back on that journey, where we've come from and where we've got to in that journey of developments in terms of police academic partnerships. And then in day 2, we will take a much more prospective envisioning of the future. So where the journey needs to go, what the challenges and opportunities are for the future. We didn't want this conference to be an end point whilst it's the end of the Catalyst grant. We didn't want it to be an end in itself, but rather to prompt new beginnings, a new phase in the development of the partnership. Under new direction, we will hear tomorrow from the new co-directors, Nairi Wayne of Merseyside Police and Jeff Pearson of Manchester University, both tomorrow morning. And tomorrow will very much set a debate and discussion about the future, about plans, and about how we move forward. Both days start with some keynote speakers and panels with some question and answers, and the afternoons are dedicated to small group workshops. Today, those workshops draw from the small grants and other projects that the N8 Policing Research Partnership has funded, with strong links to the Policing Vulnerabilities theme. You've been encouraged to pre-register for those workshops. If you haven't done so, I suggest that you do so, as each workshop is also capped to encourage engagement. Tomorrow's workshop very much pick up the future challenges. The first workshop tomorrow afternoon will focus on COVID-19 related research, which at the N8 Policing Research Partnership has been pleased to be able to fund and is funding a number of projects at the moment across diverse areas. And we'll conclude with some priority setting and some envisioning of the future. Let me move now to some of the housekeeping and administrative matters. This online format is a new adventure for us. Please bear with us if there are technical issues or any difficulties. All of the sessions are being hosted on the platform that you've accessed and are viewable during the scheduled times by clicking on the appropriate session, just like you clicked on this one. During your sessions, you can use the chat on the right side of the screen to ask questions or chat with other attendees. As I said, you need to pre-register for today's workshops. The workshops tomorrow you will be allocated to in order to mix up the participants. But today's workshops you pre-select. So do reserve your place by clicking the plus button beside the session's name. You can use the networking tab, as I said, to message other attendees or speakers and use the chat feature. The plenary sessions, including today's, are being recorded and will be made available via the N8 Policing Research website. And do use the front page of the platform as a reference point. We are using, for those who tweet, we are using the hashtag N8PRP showcase to identify tweets relating to the conference. So let me now just say something reasonably briefly about the N8 Policing Research Partnership. The N8 Policing Research Partnership is built upon the N8 Research Partnership between the N8 universities there. And it's a collaboration with policing partners. There are policing partners, 11 police forces and offices of police and crime commissioners across the north of England with whom we've been working. We've been working together collaboratively since 2013, largely prompted by some key changes to the police governance, particularly the introduction of PCCs and the College of Policing. Established as a platform to engage in relations between policing partners and others. We got our first grant in 2014 from the College of Policing, a innovation grant, and then in 2015 were awarded the Catalyst grant, which, as I said, is coming to an end this year. Last year, we secured co-funding and a co-governance model, which we'll hear more about tomorrow, I'm sure, for funding from the partners, the universities and the police, for the initial year of 2020-2021. And as I say, we will hear from the new directors. Just in terms of the kind of background and reflecting on our own journey, I think it starts very much from some real challenges that I think what has become very clear from the policing research, particularly around evidence-based policing, is that, as well as practical experiences, and I think also most evidently illustrated in the COVID-19 pandemic, is that science alone is not enough. To ensure the utilization of evidence, there is a complex interplay between knowledge, values, and implementation. And it's an acknowledgement of that complexity that the N8 Policing Research Partnership was established, that it's not simply about building the evidence base, as important as that is, or following the science, as the latest slogan goes, but rather about engaging with the politics, the values, whether they're public values or political values, as well as some of the implementation blockages that have often stymied the application of research. Ultimately, of course, policing is a normative enterprise and will always require engagement with those values and ethical issues. But the N8 Policing Research Partnership was based upon two relatively simple theories of change. The first is the idea of co-production, that knowledge is socially distributed, application-oriented, transdisciplinary, and subject to multiple accountabilities, unlike the very disciplinary siloed approaches that have traditionally informed work. The philosophy of the N8 was always that those who are going to use research and apply the knowledge base should be involved in building it by actively co-producing the evidence. For research to be translated and applied, it needs to be accessible to diverse audiences so that we can address the often noted dialogue of the deaf between police and research. This means changing the ways in which knowledge is produced and the value, reception, and use of research in informing policies and practices. So co-production has been a pervading ethos of the work of the N8 Policing Research Partnership. The advantages of co-production we have found and discovered across time derive not simply in the combination of perspectives, but also in framing and shaping questions, methodologies, and impacts differently. So we will hear this afternoon from some of the small grants which have been co-produced between practitioners and researchers, which I think are evident examples of that point. Co-production implies, therefore, a reformed conception of what constitutes knowledge, how it is mobilized, and how it is used. The second theory of change was simply that organizational change requires first sustainable partnership infrastructures rooted in relations of trust that acknowledge and embrace diversity and different knowledge and skills, and coalitions for change across organizations that allow the anchoring of change in the organizational culture, necessitating multiple points of engagement and contact. And in essence, what the N8 Policing Research Partnership has been is an attempt to construct a mechanism for delivering change. One that is not just about changing the police as an organization, but also about changing the way we as academic researchers engage with our policing partners and also in the production of knowledge. And I'm not going to go into this because we don't have time today to do so, but what we developed over the 5 years was a relatively complex series of contact points between researchers and policing partners, with a dynamic, as I said, at the core of this of research co-production, but that also was about trying to engage with our partners and different elements within the different organizations at different points around data, and particularly around the role of data analysts within policing organization, but also in enlisting frontline practitioners in the development of the research. And as I say, I think the small grants are testimony to the vibrancy, the curiosity that can unleash where it is framed within an understanding of research and the benefits that derive from it. I'm not going to go through the detail, but the way in which we structured it was each of the universities took a lead on one of the dimensions of contacts. One of the elements within that multiple pronged a series of connections and engagement points across the 5 years. And hopefully some of the flavor of that will come out across the next day. But finally, there are challenges for co-production. I think that's one of the things we've learned across the last 5 years or more. Co-production is difficult. There are differential power relations, structural conflicts, and hierarchies. Co-production is messy. Translation of ideas into practice through adaptations, concessions, adjustments, and compromises. Boundary work between the organizations is crucial, but also difficult. And therefore, there is a need for clear principles of engagement. Clear principles around the open, dynamic, and flexible nature of co-production means that these challenges are often never settled, but negotiated and on a ongoing basis. Mutual recognition and respect for difference, I think, are key to the workings of any police academic partnership, as is research integrity around what we have often referred to as independent interdependence. So let me conclude my introduction then there, and just reiterating my welcome to everybody. I'm looking forward to a packed agenda over the next few days. What I'm going to ask you all to do now is to move over, as it were, to the keynote session. And if you could click on the next session, which is the keynote session, where Mike Cunningham will join us. So if you could do that now, please.
Great, so we are off the main broadcast, and Mike, if you want to join with your video and audio, we'll get started on the next one.
I'm told I can't start my video because you've stopped it.
How does that work for you?
Got it, thank you.
All good. All right, Adam, Mike, are you two good to go?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Mike, and then I'll share the screen. I'll try and do both of those at the same time.
Sure. Adam, were you able to see my chat messages that I was sending you?
No, I wasn't. Sorry. Probably because other things were kind of littering up my screen. I think it was the images of people took over the chat. I can see the chat now, but I think people's.
Okay, so the questions will come on the Zoom chat. I'll be sending the Zoom chat to you. Okay?
I'll have to move my viewing around. Okay.
All right, I'm going to launch the session now.
Okay. Welcome back. brief move in virtual space. It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mike Cunningham. Mike, since 2018, Mike has been the Chief Executive of the College of Policing, a position that he will retire from at the end of next month, end of December this year. Before this, between 2014 and 2017, Mike was one of Her Majesty's Inspectors of Constabulary, now the HMIC FRS, with particular responsibility for the north of England. And before that, he was Chief Constable of Staffordshire Constabulary. So Mike, I think, is particularly well placed to assist us in reflecting on the journey thus far. His own personal journey is a journey in many senses that captures some of the key points and some of the key positions from which to view the development of police academic partnership and the evidence-based policing. It was during his later years as Chief Constable that I first met Mike, when Jenny Fleming decided to put together an edited collection entitled Police Leadership Rising to the Top for Oxford University Press. But to give it a different in her wisdom, she decided to pair academics and police practitioners together to produce each chapter. And I got Mike. And I was delighted to work with him. And our chapter, entitled Working in Partnership, The Challenges of Working Across Organizational Boundaries, Cultures and Practices, which was published in 2018, arose from that. And actually we used, I think, an N8 event in Manchester to rehearse our arguments back in 2014. So I've been particularly pleased that ever since then, Mike has been a friend of the N8 Policing Research Partnership. He's also an alumnus of one of the N8 universities, Durham University. The N8 PRP has worked closely with the college, who have had a seat on the N8 Policing Research Partnership steering group, and have provided sound advice across the years. Moreover, the college has played a vital role in promoting evidence-based policing and in supporting police academic partnerships, both logistically and financially. As I said a few moments ago, that we secured our first £50,000 grant from the college. So I'm going to say no more. I'm going to hand over to Mike Cunningham, who is going to speak to his title, and I'm just going to try and find where that is. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for the invitation to join the conference today. I'm very pleased to be here, and it's a great opportunity to share and reflect some thoughts. As ever with these things, I seem to have developed a cold overnight, so forgive me for that affecting how I'm speaking. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And as you've said, Adam, I'm at a period in my career where I'm in reflective mode because I am retiring from policing at the end of December after a long time in service. And I am reflecting a lot on what that has meant for me and where policing has come from and where it's going. So I want to share some of those thoughts around the evidence-based policing, the journey so far. You talked about the importance of the journey and particularly how that correlates with the college. But let me frame this right at the outset. And you've already touched on this, Adam, that this, I believe, is fundamentally about leading change. And I'll be saying a little bit more about that in a moment, but leading change, I think, is one of the most challenging elements of leadership. And it can be messy, as you've described in your introduction, Adam. It can have blurred lines, it can be challenging. It is a fundamental requirement of leadership, and it is the hardest to pull off. If we could have the next slide, please. Evidence-based policing clearly predated the establishment of the College of Policing. It has, for a long time, tens of years, informed decision-making with forums such as the Home Office Police Research Group and the like. But I'm going to kind of connect this with the establishment of the college, because when the College of Policing was established, a number of important factors came together. Because the college, as the professional body for policing, had a number of priorities. Amongst them was the identification and the development and promotion of practice which is based on evidence. And in order to do that, it was a very clear recognition that practitioners and academics had to work in a very different way in partnership. And the establishment of the collaborations, such as N8 as being a very formidable and the first formal collaboration, really actually moved this agenda forward in a way that I think we were all hoping it would. Also, we set up at the same time the What Works Centre with the whole network of applying evidence to practice. And of course, what was a huge win for us was in the establishment of the policing vision for 2025, which the leaders of the service all use to determine their strategic planning. In there, you will see explicit reference to the importance of evidence-based research being, evidence-based practice being embedded and evidence informing day-to-day practice. If we have the next slide, please. So we established the professional body, and we are a What Works Centre. So we have a unique position and some unique opportunities to influence. We can establish the national policing curriculum. We are the body in law that sets national standards and guidance. We can also inform processes and standards for selection and assessment and for training. But here's the really important point. If we are to establish an evidence-based approach in policing, there is a unique challenge, and that is the constitutional nature of British policing. In England and Wales, there are 43 Home Office forces, each led by an independent Chief Constable who reports to an independent, locally elected Police and Crime Commissioner. And that, of course, adds great weight to the British policing model of local focus, but also means that the implementation of national initiatives, national standards, national emphases really faces a challenge, because the best we can do, we have some very limited legal powers. What we have to do as a national policing body, and what other national policing bodies such as HMIC have to do, is to influence. And you will see that theme being played out in the following slides. How do we best influence? How do we win arguments? How do we persuade? How do we use the levers available to us to embed something like an evidence-based infrastructure? It's hugely important. If we could have the next slide, please. The establishment of the crime reduction toolkit presents systematic evidence, review evidence on what works in crime. And we've thought of different ways and received lots of feedback about how to present this information so practitioners can use it in the best way possible. It seems to me that the use of evidence in policing is there to assist people in making better decisions. Whether you are a PCSO working on a local antisocial behaviour issue in a community, or whether you're the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police overseeing huge strategic decisions which impact on many, many tens of thousands of people, the more evidence that we can provide people who have to make decisions, the better, in a way that's presentable, accessible to them, and allows them to make better decisions. When the What Works Centre was established in 2015, there were 15 interventions. There are now 60, with new ones added each month. And since launched, we have had over 500,000 views of the What Works Centre, peaking in September this month with 33,000 new views. And people on this conference may well be aware that we have introduced a new way of developing people coming into policing, new officers, and police forces are recruiting furiously at the moment as part of the 20,000 officer uplift program. And training and developing these officers with the new degree qualification, we hope, is one of the levers to embed an evidence-based approach to policing. And I think that the 33,000 peak viewing in September is starting to correlate with the new officers coming in and their training. When there isn't the systematic evidence available for the challenges policing is facing, what we want to present is the best available evidence. And we've done that in
I think we seem to have lost Mike. We've got some technical issues here.
I'm back. I think I've had a connection problem. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, if I could go to slide 5, Adam. I'm not sure where we picked up from. Could you go to slide 5, please?
Mike, what slides can you see?
I'll tell you what. I can see just the opening slide.
What do you know where we got to?
Slide 5, please, if possible.
Okay. Apologies, everybody. I'm trying to find out.
It's the slide which is.
I seem to be struggling to share. Slide 5.
Yeah, which is evidence-based guidance and frameworks. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, all yours.
Okay. Apologies, everybody. I think there's some technical issues there. So the crime reduction toolkit is an explicit way of sharing the evidence base, as we've just been discussing. But we've also used the development of guidance as another way of introducing the evidence base into policing. And you'll see that we have produced a number of different sections of guidance, five sets of guidelines so far: neighborhood policing, initial accounts from victims and witnesses, recognizing and responding to vulnerability, all as important parts of ways of sharing the evidence base with policing practitioners. I'm having some technical issues here, but I think I'm going to be able to resolve them. That's it. If I could have the next slide, please, Adam. One of the other levers that we have found as being a very important way of embedding evidence is to use HMI CFRS as a lever. And we have embedded the evidence base in inspection activity so that forces are inspected against the application of national guidance based on evidence as a way of measuring and introducing the evidence base into policing. If I may have the next slide, please, Adam, slide 7, please. I'm hoping I can be heard okay.
I'm just having a little difficulty getting it to move through. So
okay, well, I'll just keep speaking then. We want to build the capability amongst officers and staff in building the evidence base for themselves. And we need officers and staff to have ideas and to generate ideas and be owners of the ideas in the way that Adam spoke about before, with the whole philosophy of co-production. And we want officers to be able to take this development of the use of evidence, of thinking about what works, as part of their own continuous professional development. But let me say here that I think in order for this to be effective, I think there needs to be a very significant step change in policing in the approach to CPD. Continuous professional development is a long way away from where it needs to be in policing. And for us to be effective, for us to achieve what I think we all, to move forward on this journey around using a much more sophisticated evidence base, then we need officers and staff and police leaders to be thinking in a new way about their professional development and the way that they are led. The other thing that we have established for as part of the college is an innovation network. We know that innovation is difficult. Innovators break the mold. They challenge convention. They challenge conceived wisdom. And what I think innovators need is support. And so we in the college have established an innovators network to offer support from the centre in order to give people the leadership support that they will need. And for those innovations which are a little bit more risky, we've established the college registered pilot scheme. What that allows people to do is to register a pilot with us, where we will support them with the evidence base and developing it, and we will share the risk with them. So that if the pilot doesn't work, or if it has results which are unexpected, they do not bear the brunt of that. That's something that we can share with them. But we need to create and assist in creating an environment in which innovation and people's approach to the way things have previously been done can be challenged safely. We've also mentioned the police education qualification framework. This is the new way of training people coming into policing. We want people to be thinking more independently, to have more intellectual curiosity, and to support their approach to policing practice, which is questioning. If we could have the next slide, please. The partnership working between the police and academics, such as N8, has been hugely important, as Adam mentioned at the beginning, in ensuring that there is a connection between practitioners and academics. And reference has already been made to the Police Knowledge Fund, established in 2015, launched by the college then, to support those connections. And with funding from the Higher Education Funding Council for England and the Home Office, the £10 million fund supported 14 police academic research collaborations involving 39 forces and 30 academic institutions. And these collaborations have co-created and implemented research and practical tools with direct application to policing problems. And we're also supporting ways of officers thinking about their own development and the opportunity of co-production, of officers working hand in glove with academic experts, is a huge development opportunity which has a strong legacy that we need to continue to build on. If we have the next slide, please. I mentioned at the outset that this is about. I think probably I've just been speaking to this slide. If I may go to the next slide. Apologies, Adam. I'm slightly out of sync. So the slide. Yes, this is it. This is the slide I need. Thank you. So I've already mentioned the fact that fundamentally what we are seeking to do through these partnership arrangements, through the building of the evidence base, is to create change. And there are three fundamental requirements for effective change leadership. One is the motivation. Why do people want to do it? To persuade people it's worthwhile, to inspire them, to motivate them to proceed with that change. Then to provide with the opportunity to challenge barriers, to both to the creation and to the implementation of new ideas. And as part of that, to develop the capability of staff. It is a hugely important legacy that I believe has been for too long overlooked in policing transformation, that the development of the capability of staff always comes too late. That if we are to be thinking about changing how things are done, improving how things are done, continuing on that journey of improvement, then we need to be putting the development of staff, the development of officers and staff front and centre. Policing is overwhelmingly invested in people. Over 85% of policing budgets goes on people. And too late, I fear, in transformation discussions are people discussed. If we could have the next slide, please. So what have we achieved? Well, the good news is that people at all levels in policing are using the evidence base to support both decision-making and commissioning. And this is going to become even more important. we live in uncertain times, but what we can say, I think, with great confidence is that when the Chancellor speaks this week on the budget for the following year, for the next year, we know, I think, that between us with a lot of certainty, that money is going to be very, very tight. So I don't think that policing can expect to be receiving much more other than the money that comes in for the 20,000 officer uplift. That means that policing leaders at all levels will have to make decisions that they know, to the best of their ability know, will be effective. That's where the evidence base comes in, both to support how resources are used, but also to support commissioning and hopefully the attribution and the allocation of further resources. We also saw in the staff survey of 2017 that most respondents across policing saw a value in research, and over half reported using evidence for decision making. And only 1 in 10 thought that evidence-based policing was a fad. A great surprise, but also very, very important. We hope to continue this surveying of officers and staff to see how this continues to shift, and we continue to embed this approach to policing. If we could have the next slide, please. There are still challenges and opportunities ahead with our journey, and here on this slide I have put some up there that we need to be thinking continually about how people who develop the evidence from an academic and from a practitioner basis continue to come together with better designing, with the development of better practice, with behavioral change in how people apply this knowledge, apply this learning to their decision making. We need to build the capability. There is little value as part of recruiting 20,000 additional officers in just bringing that number of people in. We need to be thinking about how do we optimize their contribution to public safety? How do we optimize their contribution to policing? And that will be through more effective leadership, but also enhancing their capability to reflect on what works and how to apply that. And we need to sustain this impact. Any visioning for the future, and which we are part of through a refresh of the Policing Vision 2025, has to have this right at the centre of it if it is to continue to be effective. If we could have the final slide, please. I think you're going to be hearing more about this later in the conference from my colleague Nick Pole, but we need to continue to be thinking about the future. And we in the college have recently published, available on our website, Policing into 2040, the Future Operating Environment. This is a new piece of work. I think it's a high quality piece of work that colleagues have developed. Again, building on academic and practitioner insights into what the future holds. This is where the leadership of the service needs to be focused. What are the future challenges? What are the future opportunities? But not simply to rest with trying to answer those questions, but crucially to answer the question of so what? What does that mean in terms of investing in infrastructure, investing in capital, investing in technology, investing in ways of working, but more fundamentally, investing in the people who will apply this, who will lead it, and who will continue with the innovation. Thanks very much, and thank you to N8 for inviting me today and for the continued work that N8 are overseeing in relation to building this hugely important collaboration between academia and policing to build the evidence base that has always been required, but my contention is will be required with more urgency in the future. Thank you.
Mike, many thanks for that, and apologies for some of the technical issues that we had there. A couple of questions have come through. The first is whether we can share the slides. So if you're happy with that, we'll make those available via the main platform. But The other one, really, I suppose, my sense of one of the things you were talking about is that there's a great opportunity with the increased number of new officers for a kind of a generational shift, which evidence-based policing will be a part. And that's obviously a long-term kind of culture change dimension. But if I could push you maybe on something which is kind of like you're in a good place to reflect on, which is kind of the barriers that you suggested. What other barriers are there that you think, or one particular barrier that you feel really needs to be grappled with and addressed, particularly around some of the structural issues in policing, to advance the opportunities that are also presented from the kinds of work you set out, but also this generational shift that may be coming in train?
So I would agree absolutely, Adam, on the generational shift. To get a new 20,000 new police officers into the service is a huge opportunity, one that the service must not let slip through its fingers, both in terms of ways of working and also to enhance the diversity of policing. There is a big constitutional barrier, however, to how we make things work across policing. And what we saw a decade or so ago with the introduction of police and crime commissioners was a heavy emphasis on localism. The Home Office mantra at the time was localism, localism, localism. And that had all the benefits about supporting local objectives. Excuse me. However, that has come at a cost. And the cost has been that the implementation of national initiatives, national standards, is increasingly difficult. I see that this is changing at the moment. I think the current administration are putting things in place to give the centre, the Home Office or national policing bodies, more leverage. We now have a national policing board chaired by the Home Secretary. We have ministerial boards reporting into that. I think the leverage of the centre is beginning to develop more opportunity than it has had for many years. And I personally believe that's a good thing. I think that we need to have opportunities for systematic levelling up, if I may use that phrase, or improvement of standards across policing, regardless of which force people find themselves in. It is very clear from my previous job, you mentioned inspecting forces, that forces embrace innovation, embrace an approach to the evidence base with different degrees of ambition, energy and enthusiasm. And the role of people like the College of Policing and other national bodies and also initiatives such as N8 is how do we encourage everyone across policing to approach these things in a much more systematic way. That remains a challenge. I think there are opportunities, but we need to continue to push it.
Mike, thank you very much. Just one final question, because time is against us, and it really touches on, I suppose, the point that you finished off there, which is about the importance of the police to work with other partners. That if COVID has reinforced anything, it's the importance of organisations working across organisational boundaries, the police working with health service, healthcare professionals, etc., and the challenges that presents, but also the kind of opportunities with the new recruits to ensure that policing isn't something that the police seek to do alone.
I can think of no sustainable community safety intervention, not one, that's delivered by a single agency. All police know this. Officers at all levels, from constables through to chief constables, have to work in partnership if they are to be effective. Community safety is a multifaceted issue that requires multifaceted responses. And so the idea that partnership working is something that sits at the side of policing, and you and I have discussed this before, Adam, is absolutely antediluvian. The whole approach to leadership in policing has to be one which reaches across organisations and doesn't have a preciousness around the ownership and the leadership of resources. This requires a different form of leadership, but it also requires us to develop people in a new way. And we're thinking a lot at the moment around leadership development and how that should happen, not just police-specific leadership, but how we develop leaders across policing to work in a new way, a collaborative way, joint enterprise across public sector with the third sector and of course the private sector as well, to establish the sustainable interventions which are needed if we are to make community safety the priority that it needs to be. So absolutely agree with that point. And anybody in leadership roles has to be thinking across organisational boundaries if they are to be effective.
Mike, many thanks. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But many thanks for kicking this conference off with some really important messages and some themes that I'm sure we're going to return to. I know that your colleague Nick Pole is going to be joining us tomorrow to engage in precisely that kind of future thinking, which I think is another really important challenge, thinking about not just responding to incidents, but actually future planning, etc. So many thanks, Mike. Much appreciate. What we're going to do now is we're going to take it's only a 7-minute break, and we will join the next session. So you'll need to